Hello everybody, I'm Andy and welcome back to another video game retrospective. I've been kinda dabbling in other types of videos since my last retrospective, so I think it's finally time to get back to what I love doing best, revisiting old forgotten games. Although I kinda need to preface this isn't necessarily that obscure of a game, nor is it really that old for that matter, but the more I played this game, the more I realized that there was some interesting stuff to talk about. Plus, it's also pretty forgotten, at least as much as the other games that I usually cover. So with that, let's visit a driving game that has some great scenery, gives you plenty of cars to buy, and boasts one of the largest open worlds in a game, period. I like the sound of that. Test Drive Unlimited 2. Test Drive Unlimited 2 is the second game in the Test Drive Unlimited series, but it's the 20th game in the Test Drive franchise as a whole. Yeah, for whatever reason, Test Drive was a really long-lasting series, spanning across multiple decades, going through multiple publishers, and eventually ending up at Atari. Well, I say Atari, but I put a big fat asterisk right next to that. It was actually made by a publisher called Infogrames. Yeah, Grames. Which in turn acquired Atari and rebranded to Atari, but best I can tell has nothing to do with, the actual Atari. Yeah, I really don't know how that works. Anyway, I would talk more about this, but I kind of want to get in game right away. Well, this is the game. The very first thing that stands out to me is the car handling. The game feels somewhere between an arcade racer and something a little more realistic. My car has pretty good control, it's nice and responsive, but say I take a turn a little too quickly. Ooh yeah, you see that? Look how fast I spin out. I think it handles pretty nicely. There are a few times where the controls genuinely got me frustrated. Sharp turns and corners are my eternal nightmare, but hey, I guess that's sort of realistic. And even your type of car can make a difference to how good your handling is. Like one of my bigger, slower cars, it's not as fast, the acceleration is very gradual, however it is great at handling sharp turns and cutting corners. But say I pick an expensive, top-notch sports car and I try to drive it on something that isn't a straightaway. Geez, look at that, I'm losing traction on every single turn. You know those videos where you see people driving a super expensive sports car for the first time and they completely wreck it because they have no control over it? Yeah, that's basically this game if you're not careful enough. Again, simple enough to get the hang of, but just enough realism to keep you on your toes. I kinda like it. Of course, some tracks are very annoying, I'll get into that in a little bit, but in regards to the driving itself, I don't really have any problems with it. It's also interesting how there's some odd little features that remind you that Test Drive is a driving simulation series, not just a racing series. Like for instance, you can use each of your blinkers. I don't think I've seen this anywhere outside of a few truck simulators, much less a dedicated racing game. Like there's no purpose to it other than it's just there. You can indicate when you're turning. Like the police won't give you a ticket if you don't indicate, so it really doesn't have any purpose. Actually, the police won't give you a ticket at all for that matter, even if you're speeding. Although they do get pretty angry if you accidentally get into some fender bender with them. But yeah, the blinker, just a bit of an odd inclusion that's kind of there for no reason. Same with being able to put your roof up and down if you're in a convertible. Does this affect your drag at high speeds? I don't know, I don't think so, but it's there. Honestly, I kind of love little stuff like that. It gives the impression that a handful of devs thought it would be cool to put in the game. You don't see a lot of that these days, especially with AAA games. Anyways, on the map we have some races that we can compete in, but I'll get into that later. For now, we can drive around, visit car dealers, look at real estate, and yeah, that's the gameplay. We're done. I'll keep on going since there is some other stuff to talk about. I haven't even gotten to racing yet, because to me, racing in this game and open world driving might as well be two separate game modes, so I'll talk about that later. But I want to talk about the real important thing that stands out to me, the world. Test Drive Unlimited 1 and 2 were both huge open world racing games, with an emphasis on the open world. Test Drive Unlimited 1 had a scaled down map of the island of Oahu, while Test Drive Unlimited 2 has Ibiza. And these maps are big. Fun fact, I believe the city of Honolulu in Test Drive Unlimited 1 is almost as big as the entire island of GTA 5. That is pretty damn big. Of course, it looks much smaller when I'm zoomed out on the map screen, but once you're actually driving down the coast of Ibiza, damn, it is pretty jaw-dropping just how much there is to, explore. There's something surreal about being able to drive on a racetrack, see a mountain in the distance, and to be able to drive on it. And not like in that Todd Howard, the mountains are actually part of the skybox way, but in a fully explorable, unrestricted way. It's so insane to me how stuff that would be part of the skybox in other games is part of the actual level here that you can actually drive to and explore. Something about that keeps messing with my brain. I can't explain it. There's always been a debate about open world games, whether or not maps need to be huge and open or a little smaller and more cluttered. Test Drive Unlimited goes for huge and vast. And if I'm being honest, I think it made the right call. Being able to drive around in a game is fun, but being able to explore a massive open environment like this, God, sign me up. Of course, driving games don't need to have huge open maps. I know I've enjoyed plenty of smaller sized racing games, but God, there's something about Test Drive Unlimited whose scale creates a very unique feeling for the entire game, something that not many other games are able to match. Both games do this too. Ibiza and Test Drive Unlimited 2 is very big, and I think Oahu and TDU 1 is just slightly bigger, but both maps show off their scale incredibly. I think currently Fuel has the largest open world map out there, with The Crew taking a close second place, but before either of those games, Test Drive Unlimited 1 had Oahu, which was possibly the largest open world map that existed at the time. Actually, maybe Daggerfall, but I don't think anything beats Daggerfall. Test Drive Unlimited maps are huge, and this is no exception in Test Drive Unlimited 2's portrayal of Ibiza. There's something pretty breathtaking about driving up to a vantage point and seeing the entire other half of the island, miles and miles away, knowing full well that that part of the map is real and exists and you can drive there. Of course, both games utilize some pretty liberal LOD distance optimization. Like, I'm not a graphics snob, but seriously, look at these mountains. They're so low res you can literally count the polygons on a single hand. But despite that, the scale of the islands I think are pulled off successfully. To me, this works. Anyways, enough of open maps and open levels, let's just enjoy some time at Ibiza. Beautiful, beautiful Ibiza. I've actually never been, but I must say exploring it in this game is pretty nice. We have dense woodlands, open farmland, bustling cities, and old cobblestone Mediterranean villages. Oh yeah, this is what I want in my driving games. Of people who like racing games, there's usually a variety of reasons why people choose certain games. Maybe it's the car handling, or maybe it's a particular model of car that game has, or maybe it's the online component. But for me, it is all about the scenery. I was actually planning on revisiting the first game alongside the second game as well. Maybe I was going to do a retrospective on that game instead. Maybe I was going to check out the countless mods and fan patches for it that make the multiplayer usable. Who knows? I was definitely going to check it out. However, this is where I encountered the very first snag in making this video. Test Drive Unlimited 1 would not run. At all. Oh sure, the game would install, no errors there, but the second I'd run it, hard crash to desktop. Okay, I see what's going on. Looks like I need to get some fan patches installed. So I scoured the web looking for solutions, patches, or just about anything that would make this game run on my PC. Nothing worked. And I mean nothing. I tried patching it many times. No luck. I followed every single piece of advice from every conceivable forum I could find. Changing compatibility settings, turning off mouse DPI settings, messing with full screen optimization. Nada. I looked at every forum post and thread that I could find. No matter how old or how obscure, I looked everywhere, and not a single thing helped. Was it a Windows 10 problem? It might have been. But wait a sec, I've played this game before, on a Windows 10 PC no less. But when I install it to this one and try to play it, just for whatever reason, it doesn't fucking work. Also, I'm understating how much I tried to get this fucking game to run. I tried every option I could find. I was tearing my hair out knowing full well that this may have been a barrier to the video. Because honestly, a huge premise and part of the video relied on this game. I wanted to talk about both games, and even though TDU 2 was the focus, I had plenty to say about Test Drive Unlimited 1. That was the idea. But this pretty much put the doubt in my head that, yeah, this video might not be happening, which would have sucked. I was close to just giving up on the video and moving on. So that was my main option. I could drop the video entirely, give up, and do a different game. Or I could continue the video, but I'd need some workarounds. This would probably give me two options. The first option was to buy a used copy of the game for my Xbox 360 and run it there, while also buying a capture card to record the footage. I really didn't want to do this. For starters, I don't even have a capture card, and I don't want to splurge on a really nice one just to record fucking Test Drive Unlimited footage. I could buy a cheap one, but I'm saving up for a nice one. I don't want to throw away that money for a crappy, cheap capture card that'll replace in a year anyways. That's just wasting money. I also didn't want to be making some disingenuous comparison, since I'd be comparing an Xbox game to a PC game. Visuals are a big thing for me. I want the PC port of TDU1 at a crisp HD resolution, just to make my arguments a little fair. That meant I need the PC port of Test Drive Unlimited 1 just to do that. My second option, instead of using a 360 copy, would be to just ask someone else to give me their own footage of TD1 running on the PC. I don't want to do that. Oftentimes there's horrible compression on their end, resolution is really bad, or you can't account for what's in their footage. Maybe I need a specific shot or a specific clip, but I can't do that if it's someone else's footage. Lots of problems crop up when I use other people's clips. It's why, especially lately, I'll only do it when it's absolutely necessary, as in when I literally don't have the game in my hands to record. But those are my two options. Fuck me, really? I just want to record some Test Drive Unlimited 1. Why isn't it working on my PC? Honestly, what else can I do? Well, after some thinking and pondering, I realized something else. There's actually a third unexpected option I could try. So I've played this game before, on a Windows 10 PC no less. That PC is actually quite old. I've replaced it years ago, and as of now, I'm pretty sure it's just collecting dust in a closet somewhere. I literally haven't booted it up in years. I don't even remember what was installed on the hard drive, but I absolutely remember running Test Drive Unlimited 1 on that PC years and years ago. And I don't remember uninstalling it. Like, I could have sworn that I simply left the game installed all this time. I mean, my memory is far from perfect. That's a pretty big gamble, but this is the best lead I've got. Test Drive Unlimited 1 may still be installed in that old PC, and it may still work. However, this would mean that I'd have to find my old computer, drag it out of whatever storage closet it's been in for the last few years, then hope, fingers crossed, that TD1 still runs on it. To which I would then get footage of it, play it for use in this video, which I have to transfer over to my main PC. Would I seriously go through the hassle of doing that? The things I fucking do for you guys. So here you go. Here's your damn Test Drive Unlimited 1. Well, it plays pretty much identically. Driving is the same. However, the police in TD1 are fucking vicious. I still have no idea if they're meant to be this aggressive or not, but it's basically game over if you get a wanted level. You may as well just reset. Although I will say I do like Oahu a little bit more than Ibiza, but that's just personal preference. Anyways, the thing I'm noticing the most about the first game, more than the second game, is just how open it really is. In Test Drive Unlimited 2, you're assaulted by cutscenes, characters, story, and you're also kind of restricted in what you're able to do, especially early on in the game. But here, I feel like I can do just about anything. I've just started this game, and I'm already able to drive across Oahu. That's a pretty good change of pace. Anyways, gameplay differences aside, there was one big reason why I kinda like TDU2 a little more than Test Drive Unlimited 1. It may not be a big reason to some, but for me, it's kind of important. Let's talk about graphics. I'm just gonna say it outright. The graphics for Test Drive Unlimited 2 are fucking beautiful. This game is 11 years old and it looks fantastic. Character models are definitely weak, almost comically low quality, but who cares? This game is about cars, not people. Honestly, aside from a few little quirks in the graphics, this entire game looks like it could be a close to modern release, maybe on medium graphic settings. Hey, I've seen a bunch of comparisons of this game and the crew, and if it wasn't for the dated lighting engine in Test Drive Unlimited 2, I would be pretty hard pressed to tell the difference. The thing that pops into my head when I think about Test Drive Unlimited 2's visuals is how crisp they are. Like, it's not flashy or overdone, it's just simply pleasant to look at. Personally, I'm just glad that they didn't slap some sort of piss filter over the camera, as was tradition for a lot of other racing games at the time. But yeah, as far as graphics go, I think this game still looks pretty good. It might just be my personal taste, but I don't know, it just holds up. Anyway, time to reveal the true reason why I chose this game over its predecessor, and it's because of the graphics. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking that I'm a shallow fuckhead who only likes games with good graphics. Well, no. I chose this game because I like the graphics, not exclusively because they were better. Test Drive Unlimited 1 had pretty decent graphics for its time. I'd say it looks pretty good, especially for an open world game of its scale in 2006. Honestly, I'm shocked it holds up as well as it does. However, there was always something off about it. I want to chalk it up entirely to the color in the game, because everything felt kinda off. I rarely got the feeling that I was driving around Hawaii. I think this was due to just everything having a weird dark shade of color. Like, look at the vegetation. Everything is this dark shade of cold green, a color that wouldn't look out of place in maybe the Pacific Northwest or pine forests up along the Great Lakes, but not tropical Polynesia. Now, I've been to Hawaii, and I can tell you the one color I remember is a beautiful, vibrant, bright green. To me, that's Hawaii. Even still, green vegetation aside, there was always something that bothered me about the graphics. It took me a while, but I finally figured it out. HDR. To preface this, I don't want to sound like the guy who hates all modern graphical features. Like, I enjoy HDR when it's done right. I enjoy bloom when it's done right. I enjoy motion blur. Okay, never mind. I guess I do hate some modern graphics features. Anyway, HDR in Bloom was a huge discovery in the mid to late 2000s, to the point where every single game decided to smear the entire world in it. With HDR turned on, you do get pretty decent lighting and some decent color. But for whatever reason, the contrast of everything fucking blows up through the roof. Shadows are pitch black, and when you drive over them, the entire sky flashes briefly into a bright white before resuming to a sickly looking shade of blue. This is something a lot of games do with HDR. Like the screen brightens when you go into a dark building, and the sky outside looks like it's completely overblown. But then you go back outside, and then the lighting kind of drops down. However, this happens every single time you drive over a shadow in Test Drive Unlimited 1, so the entire brightness for your screen is constantly going in and out. It's really distracting. Turning off HDR does help with this. The sky is just the right brightness, shadows are still kind of broken, but Jesus Christ, look how washed out everything is. Nothing's really popping anymore, instead it looks kind of flat and ugly. It's not terrible, but it's just not ideal. Again, this is the problem with the art direction at its core, not just the graphics. So I'm forced to decide between Oahu with really blown out colors and lighting, or Ibiza with quite nice colors and lighting. Gosh, Oahu was such a great island too. I wish I could just experience it in a newer game's engine. Like the only thing I'd want fixed from it is just the color and the lighting. That's literally it. Well, lo and behold, the developers heard my pleas. This is the reason why I chose Test Drive Unlimited 2 over Test Drive Unlimited 1, because guess what? It has Oahu as well. Normally I'd expect the first game to have one island and the second game to have another island, but nope. Test Drive Unlimited 2 has one different island and the same island from Test Drive Unlimited 1. And as far as I can tell, they didn't just reuse the same assets, they overhauled it too. Remember my complaints about green vegetation? Oh yeah, that's been fixed. Annoying bloom, washed out colors, that is a thing of the past. Yes, this game looks beautiful. So when it came to deciding which game I wanted to make a video on, yeah, it was a no-brainer. Sure, there's some gameplay differences that definitely makes the first game a little better than the second game, and I'll get into them in a sec, but man, the visuals, the scenery, I can't pass that up. So let's fly to Oahu. Oh man, as much as I love TDU1, I gotta say, Hawaii got the improvement that it deserved in the second game. Honestly, there's just too much to cover on what I like. The bright colors, a sky that actually looks like a sky. While we're talking about graphics, I need to talk about TDU2's along with its environments, because it's pretty great. I mean, I mentioned earlier, for an 11-year-old game, TDU2 still looks pretty great, especially when you consider the scale of the game. Like, compared to other 2011 racing games, I mean, it wasn't the best looking on the market, but its graphics have remained very crisp and pleasant to look at. Plus, there weren't many games at that time that were doing quite the same thing Test Drive Unlimited 2 was doing. I'd say the closest comparison to this game would be like Fuel or something. It's that big. It's the kind of game that, sure, the graphics are a bit dated, but honestly, I don't care, because the game just looks nice. There's a few parts of the game that look a little dated, like I mentioned before, but it really doesn't distract from the whole experience. Also, when you're outside of a vehicle, like maybe exploring your house or something, the graphics do look a little dated, but again, I don't mind. Just the scale of this game with how nice it looks, I don't really care. Even then though, there's a few details that I really like. Like for example, the road pavement is actually really super detailed, and after it rains, you get this really nice reflective surface. I don't know, I just like the way it looks. Another weird quirk about TDU2's lighting is that it really can't do sunsets. I don't even know why I'm bringing this up, it's just something I noticed. Whenever dusk approaches, the sky turns into this grimy shade of brown and orange. It also conveniently has clouds that completely block the sun and the horizon. The entire game briefly looks like a post-apocalyptic setting while this happens, and it's just a little too weird. Ah, night driving. I must admit, the night driving in this game is pretty damn great. Test Drive Unlimited 2 added in a day-night cycle that the first game didn't have, and man, I'm kinda glad that they did. Although the day-night cycle is a little screwy. Whenever you launch the game, the time resets to early morning, meaning that you have to wait a bit for a night to fall. This is further made problematic by how frequently this game crashes. I'll talk more about that in a bit. Either way, once you wait long enough and wait for the sun to set, you're treated by the wonderful atmosphere this game has at night. I love it, especially when you're cruising around the city, the streets are all lit up, or when you're out in the freeway driving across the island and you see the moon and stars clear in the sky. That's pretty great stuff. It may sound weird that I'm focusing so much about night driving, but I just like it. I actually love driving at night in real life. I think my obsession for it began when I had my first job, which required me to help close a retail store every single day. We would close at around 9:30 or 10, then stay even an hour longer just to clean up everything. That job sucked, and that particular store went out of business years ago, but I have distinct fond memories of driving back home across town in the dead of night, when everything was closed, no one was on the road, and it was just me and my thoughts. It might be a Pavlovian response, like I associate driving at night with my day finally being over and me being able to relax, but either way, I still like driving at night. It's a good way to cool down and detox. But yeah, night driving is great in this game. I feel like once again, the sheer size of this map helps sell the immersion. I feel like I can drive anywhere across the island, or those faint lights in the distance are actual buildings and houses full of people getting ready to sleep for the night. I especially love finding some hidden corner of the map, being able to park, and just take in the atmosphere. Honestly, I wish I could just step out of the car, walk out in the fresh air, maybe hear the waves, and just bask in this game's world. I love it. I can't stress this enough. The atmosphere in this game is amazing. While we're driving through this scenic town, I should probably bring up another pretty important aspect of this game: customization. What's interesting about the Test Drive Unlimited games is that it's not just a racing game. Like, it is definitely that, but it puts just as big an importance on customizing your character, collecting cars, and customizing them individually. You can change paint schemes, add decals, upgrade individual parts. There's some pretty detailed options here that can even trump more recent racing games. It's impressive stuff. There's also a little bit of managing real estate and customizing your character, so I always got the impression that the Test Drive Unlimited series was focused around multiplayer interactions rather than just racing. It's not just about being the fastest driver, it's about looking cool while doing it. And I gotta say, the customization in Test Drive Unlimited 2 is way more in depth than I thought it would be. Like, if you go to YouTube right now and look up some custom TDU2 cars and stickers, you'll find a whole host of unique designs out there. It's pretty great. I think the closest comparison would be the Forza Horizon games. You can really customize how your car looks in that series, and fun fact, the first Horizon game came out just a year after TDU2, so who knows, maybe the devs were inspired. Matter of fact, that's kind of a good comparison overall. The more I play Test Drive Unlimited games, the more I kind of understand what the devs were going for, or at least where their focus was. It's not necessarily in just racing in loops and tracks. Well, it is, but it's not the entire game. Instead, there's a big focus on social multiplayer, customizing your avatar, your car, having your own housing, your own garages. This is pretty good stuff for a social multiplayer game. But yeah, the customization is pretty fun. Definitely kept me distracted for a bit getting just the right paint job for my cars. It also got me interested in upgrading my cars, especially for some of the championships that require your cars to be pretty high stat. And yeah, I should probably talk about races, shouldn't I? Test Drive Unlimited 2 diverges from Test Drive Unlimited 1 in a pretty big way, and that lies in the competitions. In TDU1, you had various races and missions scattered around the island. You could participate in one, complete it, earn the full reward, then replay it as many times as you want, continually earning that full reward. For Test Drive Unlimited 1, it feels like most of the races are kind of just separated from one another, just scattered around the map. Not here. Test Drive Unlimited 2 introduces competitions. Competitions are the main focus for this game, and the way they work is pretty simple. Entering a competition requires a specific car and subcategory. For example, an A6 competition requires an asphalt car that is at a subcategory of 6. Just like in TD1, the lower the number, the higher the stats on the car. But unlike TD1, a lot more races are restricted to certain subcategories, meaning that for most of these championships, you better have a car that fits that number because you're going to be using that car the entire time. Anyways, this sounds a little complicated, but you're going to have to bear with me. Every championship has 7 or so missions within it, and you're pitted against a bunch of AI drivers who are all doing the same missions. Basically, each mission will give you points depending on how far in first you got. And then at the end of the championship, all the scores are tallied up and the person with the highest score wins. Luckily, you can retry each mission over and over until you're confident with completing the championship. The best way to do this is to retry each mission until you reach gold. And luckily, you don't have to ace each one either. Instead, you just need to gain more points than everyone else. So you can afford to get a few silvers or bronze on some of these other missions, especially the hard ones. That is going to start happening later in the game, trust me. But so long as you do well on most of them, you're going to stay in the lead with no problem. Each of these tiny missions also give you a little bit of money, a few grand and that's it, which is a really tiny amount of money for this game. However, when you complete all these missions and you complete the championship itself, you'll win a big prize of money. Early on, the rewards are somewhere between 70 and 90,000 bucks, but later ones are going to give you like 100 or 200,000 bucks. So completing these missions is pretty important if you want to actually level up and make some money. There is a problem though. You can't ever redo a competition to get more money. Let me rephrase that. You can complete each mission within that competition, and you can make the money that that individual mission will give you over and over. So for example, you can make a few grand on redoing a race course in one championship, but you're never going to get the full reward that completing the whole set will give you. Meaning that you can't just grind a championship for a couple $100 grand over and over. Instead, you can only win it once. To me, this style of gameplay is a step forward and a pretty big step back. On one hand, I don't mind how this game isn't really that grindy. As much as I love the first game, that game really made grinding a necessary tactic for those who wanted to actually make money. Anybody who's played Test Drive Unlimited 1, and you can ask anybody because everyone did this, is that starting out you would do a few races, kind of explore the island, then you'd find that one race that would give you a ton of money and was easy to beat over and over again. And you would just do that mission over and over, slowly getting better at it until you started making a lot of profit. Test Drive Unlimited 2 system actually encourages players to go out and try new missions, rather than just grind through an old one to make a consistent amount of money. It's a way to encourage players to go out and explore the island, maybe find some new encounters, and save up enough money to buy the next car for the next championship. And I kind of thought I would enjoy this. A steady progression with experience and levels, hey, that beats grinding the same racetrack over and over. However, it kind of ruins the simplicity of the first game in two big ways. The very first thing I noticed was how each racetrack started to lack its own identity. The one thing I find an odd sense of appreciation for in Test Drive Unlimited 1 is how that game is designed for completionists. Everything from owning every car, exploring the entire island, and getting a gold medal on every course. That game is a completionist wet dream. I have fond memories of replaying a mission over and over in that game, learning the route, coming up with strategies on how to actually beat it, and finally getting the gold medal. There's an odd sense of appreciation I have for games like that. Games that encourage players to revisit certain levels just to completely ace them. But in the sequel, there really isn't that much value in replaying a race. Yeah, you still get money, but it's shit compared to just starting another competition. Test Drive Unlimited 1 was grindy as hell. I'm not denying that. You'd be an idiot if you didn't replay a track over and over in that game just to make a quick buck. However, Test Drive Unlimited 2 encourages players to do the opposite, to not replay a race or redo a track, to instead just move on until there are no new championships left. When I first played Test Drive Unlimited 1, despite it being an older game at the time, I was completely blown away at just how much freedom it gave you. A tiny short intro and bam, the world is yours right off the bat. You could explore the whole island, participate in challenges that were way out of your league, but you could still participate in them. You progress at your own pace in that game. If you wanted to, you could just hang around Honolulu and replay races right there to earn some more cash. You could also explore the far side of the island, maybe do a road trip, driving through little towns and villages just to see what other races you could participate in. That's the ultimate difference between the first game and the second game. Test Drive Unlimited 1 was willing to let the player progress at their own pace. They could do whatever they wanted with no hand-holding. But in Test Drive Unlimited 2, everything feels way too restrictive. Races that can only be completed once, and when they're gone, they're pretty much gone for good. I honestly believe this is the main reason why Test Drive Unlimited 2 was disliked way more than its predecessor. It's hard to just jump into a race in TDU2. For example, say you want to compete in a championship. Well, first, you need to complete the other preceding missions to unlock it. For example, you can't just jump into an A1 championship. Instead, you need to complete the A7 and A6 competitions just to level up to reach that level 10. Then you need to fly to Hawaii. Then you need to complete more missions, A5, A4, A3, until you'll finally have access to A2 and A1 championships. But you can't compete in them just yet. Now you need to go get a license. Well, how hard can that be? Getting a license is as complicated as a championship in and of itself, except it's way worse. You have to complete all these little tasks within a given time limit, and they are fucking cheap too. Hairpin turns, AI that will kamikaze dive bomb you, in which if a single car touches you, you have to restart the whole thing. You have asphalt cars that spin out on sharp turns, tracks and missions that are there just to make the player rage quit, and this is for every level too. Every single rank of asphalt car requires you to finish these training courses, which don't earn you any money and are just there to waste your time. They are constructed in such a way to make you want to give up. It's hilarious because all of these missions for these training courses are infinitely more challenging than the actual championships that you're apparently training for. There's definitely more to talk about though. You got traditional lapped courses, speed camera courses, courses where you have to stay on the road and maintain a certain speed limit to get points. I mean, it's standard stuff, but it gets a little repetitive. The AI is pretty dumb too. They have really bad rubber banding and catch-up mechanics. So often at the beginning of a race, what you want to do is swerve right in front of the guy in second and force him to slow down so that he can't inexplicably accelerate past you. But yeah, they're pretty boring after a certain point. And for whatever reason, there's a ton of padding in a lot of these courses, like way too many laps for a simple small race course. However, there was one type of race that stood out to me, mainly for being a fun idea. And that was a race that took you around the entire island of Ibiza. Yeah, like a single lap around the whole island. This race literally takes an hour to complete. It's that big of a map. You know what? I actually kind of love this. Plenty of racing games have tight, narrow laps and tiny racetracks, so when Test Drive Unlimited does it, it just feels kind of derivative. Besides, these tracks don't have the same level of detail that those other games have, simply because the scale of the map is too big to give each tiny road its own personality. You aren't going to have quality, detailed short race courses like other more focused games. But you know what this game has that they don't? A whole massive fucking island to drive around in. So why not use that instead? Honestly, had the game been more about this as opposed to just smaller busy work, I would be fully on board. Give me long distance races that take you through the heart of Ibiza or Oahu. Give me huge chill tracks that force you to circumnavigate whole islands. This stuff is great. I wish there was more of it. But the single player racing was very clearly tacked on. Instead, Test Drive Unlimited 2, I'm guessing, focused most of itself on a more important feature, the multiplayer. And with that, we've finally hit a conundrum. And I'm going to have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Test Drive Unlimited 2 is dead. I don't just mean its servers are empty and as a result the multiplayer just isn't playable anymore. I mean the game itself is broken. TDU2 was ahead of its time, but not in a good way. This game was designed from the ground up with multiplayer in mind. So many of its features are tied to the online component, to the point that Test Drive Unlimited 2 was pretty much an online-only game. Might as well have been. For whatever reason, this same style of game has been revisited countless times in recent years. It's almost become a bit of a trend. TDU2 wasn't just ahead of its time, it serves as a warning to all those kinds of games. The online component to both Test Drive Unlimited 1 and 2 is gone. As in, the servers are completely shut down and nothing involving an internet connection works. For example, you can't access DLC. You can't update the game. You can't patch the game. Hell, I'm pretty sure you might not even be able to download the game in the first place. I somehow got lucky with Steam. I managed to get an online code and installed the game literally months before the game became abandonware. You cannot easily obtain a copy without scouring eBay, which really isn't a solution. If I remember correctly, Atari pretty much went bankrupt, and I want to say at a certain point there were only like 10 people managing the entire company. So the Test Drive brand itself has been acquired by a completely new company, and all the old Test Drive games, Test Drive Unlimited 1 and 2 included, have been removed from every single digital storefront. So both of these games, TDU 1 and 2 for the PC, are pretty much inaccessible. And unfortunately, the only easy way to play either of these games on the PC involves less than ethical means. I'd say for many of you non-American watchers, this is probably your only way. Now these games can be played offline. However, it's a pain in the fucking ass to do so. You have to download your own launcher, you have to install your own patches. Hell, even then the game still crashes all the time. This is not an optimized solution at all, and I highly doubt things are going to get better as time marches on. This is a testament to how fucked online-only games are going to get in years to come, when all of these services are shut down, all of these companies are bought out, and these games are left to rot. By sheer coincidence, as of the writing of this video, another different racing game, Gran Turismo 7, just released, and it had a huge controversy with its online-only design. From what I know, when the game was being reviewed by game critics, the online progression for it was supposedly pretty fair. Races gave plenty of money, cars didn't cost that much, and overall it seemed like critics liked it. They said it was rewarding and didn't at all require microtransactions to progress. Reviewers gave it good scores. However, once those reviews came out and the game actually released, the developers literally went in, rebalanced the game economy, and made it completely unfair. Since the game is always online, they were able to force these updates out to everybody, in which they made races give less money, cars became way more expensive, and they completely broke the pay-to-win system. There's apparently one car in the game, one of the fastest cars too, that costs so much in-game money that it will either require $200 to unlock with real money, or more than 24 hours worth of grinding alone. For a single car! It's honestly funny how comically evil this is. They waited until after the reviews came out before they sprung this on players. I want to be angry, and for genuine Gran Turismo fans, I am definitely angry on your behalf, but for every fucking moron who tried to downplay how bad always online games were, this is exactly what you deserve. This is the natural conclusion of the live service AAA model. Waiting for your game to get good reviews, then stealth patching it so that it fucks over every player and just moving on like a huckster. And I hope that everyone who defended this practice for Gran Turismo 7 is having fun with their game. And hey, I know exactly what you're gonna say, but Andy, they fixed it. They listened to all the feedback and they're making it more fair. No, they aren't. Of course, they'll pretend that they are. They'll say that they're working on it, lowering cost of cars, making progression easy, but they don't actually care about fixing it. They tried to run away with as much money as they could, and they simply got caught red-handed. They're not sorry for being gritty, they're sorry for getting caught. I've seen this a million times over and over, and honestly, I'm kind of sick of giving developers the benefit of the doubt anymore. Guys, they know what they're doing. They aren't stupid. Well, I mean, when it comes to scamming people out of their money, they aren't stupid. But you know what I mean. The only reason they're backtracking is for PR. They knew they destroyed their good publicity, so they're trying to regain a little bit of it back. Don't ever trust a company that pulls stuff like this. They know they're making their game worse, they just don't care. And hey, judging by how bad the game still is and how expensive cars still are, I think my point has been proven. You know, a while back, someone at EA, one of the studio heads I believe, had an interview where he talked about how single-player games were dead, and online-only games were much better in every single way. I remember this being like a decade ago, and it was back when many companies started pushing towards having online-only platforms, mostly to squeeze more and more money out of a yet-to-be-fed-up gaming audience through live service microtransaction nightmare fests. He also made the comment specifically that he was proud to not intentionally publish any offline single-player games at his time at EA. Yeah. Pretty fucking horrific if you ask me. But the hilarious timing out of all of this? Well, as best as I can tell, that first interview was published on December 8th, 2010. Test Drive Unlimited 2 itself came out on February 8th, 2011. Exactly 2 months after this interview went live to the day. Of course, TDU2 was not an EA game, but that's besides the point. It still followed the philosophy to a T. Honestly, there's something quite fitting about this. You got a smarmy company head talking about how great online-only games are, how superior they are to offline single-player games. Then, a couple months later, you get a game coming out that follows that online-only philosophy to a T. And guess what? A decade later, that game is completely broken and unplayable, all thanks to those amazing online-only features that are surely better than an offline single-player game. Meanwhile, older racing games that don't force an online-only feature are working just fine in 2022. What do you know? This is what online-only games are going to look like when their publisher gives up on them. Dead, empty games. Completely broken, feeling like shells of their former selves. This is what we all have in store for us with every single AAA game that comes out that sells itself as a live service model. TDU2 should be a fucking monument to that, with a completely broken sandbox, broken online play, leftover DLC items that you can no longer access legitimately, all a big empty husk. And this game is only going to get worse too. As it stands right now, TDU2 requires an entire host of fan patches and offline fan-made launchers just to even play the game that you bought. And even now, this is still finicky. The number of times I've crashed to desktop is unbelievable. It's just not a feasible solution, you guys. I don't even want to comprehend how bad this thing will handle the next decade of modern Windows updates. This is a ticking clock where, as far as we know, there will be a moment when this game just will not run at all, and there'll be no one left who cares to fix it. Sorry for the dramatics, but this game brought it out of me. Driving through these empty, desolate roads, I think back to the countless number of players who spent time here. Private lobbies of people racing their cars, making cash, using it to upgrade their cars even further. Just imagining the thousands of hours players spend in this world, only to see it thrown to the side of the road and left to rot. It's just sad. The only silver lining here is that both games were quite popular in the mod scene. TDU2 had a smaller player base, and TDU1 definitely gets more of the attention, but there are still mods and fan patches made for both games. I mentioned this earlier, but the only way I'm able to play this game is through a fan-made offline launcher. Test Drive Unlimited 1 definitely has the better fan content though. Modded online support, communities built around keeping the game still active, and mods that add in a ton of content. There's a pretty famous mod for the game that's called the Platinum mod. I haven't tried it because, again, I'm having to run TDU1 on a separate computer for the time being, but it looks pretty amazing. Basically a huge catalog of cars added to the game, some of which aren't even racing cars, like just regular boring sedans, SUVs, and hatchbacks. That's pretty fucking awesome. God, I kind of feel jealous now. Test Drive Unlimited 1 fans have way better support than those of us who want to play the sequel. So one game, for whatever reason, is easier to download, but has less mod support. The other game is harder to download, yet has buttloads of mods and fan patches. So you kind of have a choice there. And hey, this series isn't as dead as I thought. That's right. Test Drive Unlimited 3. It is currently on the way. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. This kind of came out of nowhere, and I was kind of as shocked as most people just to see it was even being worked on. If I remember correctly, the original devs of Test Drive Unlimited have kind of branched off. Some of them are working on Gear Club Unlimited, a dumbed-down mobile racing game, and I want to say a few of them formed the studio that works on The Crew, although don't quote me on that. I just remember hearing that there was apparently a crossover of developers. Either way, with how scuffed this series is right now in regards to Atari's former ownership, I thought a sequel was completely out of the question. But nope, we're getting one. It's also questionable what the current rights holders of Test Drive Unlimited even want it to be. Nacon? I'll just call him Big Ben. These are the guys who bought it from Atari, and they're planning to just reboot the whole series. There's been a few trailers. I don't recall seeing any gameplay, but we know where it's going to be set. Hong Kong. And it's going to be a 1-to-1 recreation. A few things stand out to me. First, the size of the map. Hong Kong in real life is 427 square miles. Meanwhile, Test Drive Unlimited 1's Oahu, I've seen estimates from people saying that it was about 600 square miles. So it's going to be slightly smaller than Oahu, but it's probably going to make up for it for way more side streets and dense roads. That brings up the second point. Hong Kong is a very unusual choice for a test drive game. Dense urban sprawls with narrow side streets filled with skyscrapers and buildings on either side, that's a very different map than Oahu or Ibiza. Sure, there are dense pockets of buildings on both of those maps, but it was always in the middle of these lush islands with wide open vistas and fields. Hong Kong is way more densely packed than either of those islands, with a really dense forest in the center of it. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. The trailer for the game kind of gives off a different vibe for me. It looks like it's going for more of a Need for Speed style street racing, with even the final shot looking like something out of The Crew or Forza. I don't know how I feel about that. I certainly want to play it, that's for sure, but my opinion remains to be seen until we actually see some gameplay. It's also noteworthy that they aren't calling it Test Drive Unlimited 3, but instead, Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. Well, right away, the title actually kind of worries me because the Solar Crown competition was the entire focus of TDU2. Yeah, all those championships that force you to play multiple missions within them. So I'm a little nervous on how this one is going to play out. Are they going to have the same system, or are they going to go back to something from TDU1? I wish I knew. Although it's pretty understandable why they aren't just calling it Test Drive Unlimited 3, because I know for a fact that had they named this game Test Drive Unlimited 3, you'd have a ton of people going, hey, this is a third game in the trilogy. I've never played the other two before, and there would be a ton of mass confusion over why both are missing from Steam. You simply call it Solar Crown, and it kind of disconnects itself from the previous two. Either way, I'm definitely interested in seeing how new players will react to 1 and 2 being completely out of reach. It'll be pretty confusing, that's for sure. I've never quite heard of something like this happening, where the third entry in a pretty successful series of games is currently being advertised and on its way, yet the other two games are completely missing. It's really bizarre. Anyways, we've seen the CG trailers from last year, so until we actually get some gameplay, this game might just be vaporware at this point. Who knows? Hey, I'm all for large maps to explore. If they can deliver it, I'll play it. If not, no biggie. Although I do hope that they reconsider how missions are handled. That's my only hang-up. Alright, enough current events. So that's Test Drive Unlimited 2. You know what? What a fun racing game. It's hard to deny that this series has a really complicated and messy history, and with countless bugs, glitches, gameplay changes, you'd think I'd be a little more critical of this game. To an extent I am. I despise how this game is basically a looking glass into the future of online-only games, and is the first example of what we're going to deal with as more and more games shut down. It's like seeing a ghost town. Or like one of those fake North Korean towns that they build on the border with South Korea. Sure, the roads aren't completely empty, there are lights on, it looks kind of alive, but deep down you know that it's just a facade and the real population has left decades ago. Kinda creepy. But despite this, I found myself quite fond of the game. The driving is fun, the cars are great to collect, and the world is just beautiful. Ibiza was nice, but Oahu was the standout. From those moments where I was cruising along a sunny coastline on a clear, sunny day, or in sleepy Honolulu on a quiet night, this game was great to explore. Also, its size is still impressive to this day. It's massive. The larger map design fits with all the driving because, again, it's not just about racing or upgrading your car. For me, it's all about taking in the sights. For every frustrating race that made me want to rage quit, I had an entire hour of circumnavigating the island, just chilling out and completely immersing myself in the world. That's all that mattered to me, and Test Drive Unlimited 2 delivered. So would I recommend this game? It depends. If you have some means of acquiring it on PC and you aren't afraid of doing a bit of modding and patching to get it up and running, I'd say it might just be worth the effort. That goes for 1 or 2. You better be familiar with acquiring abandonware games and being able to get them working on modern OSs. Otherwise, you're in for a really rough ride. You could also buy used copies for the 360 and PS3. From what I've heard, those ports aren't that bad. But don't expect amazing performance or graphics like you'd get on the PC. It's definitely a gamble because honestly the best part about this game, in my eyes, are the visuals. And the console versions just have this layer of blur to them that separates you from the environments even more. That's just how console games are. PC will always be better. Here the PC version is the way to go, except it's the hardest version to acquire and get up and running. But it's also the most moddable. So I'd answer yes, but only for crazy people. Also, fun side tangent, but did you know that Test Drive Unlimited 1 had a ridiculous amount of ports? I mentioned the 360 port earlier, but goddamn, I had no idea it was ported to so many other consoles. It was ported to the friggin' PS2? Yeah, not the PS3, the PS2. It was also ported to the PSP, and I'm not talking about different spin-off games made exclusively for those consoles. No, they're full-blown ports with the entire map layout and everything. Apparently the devs had to add in custom new skyboxes because the PS2 and PSP couldn't support rolling weather. I don't know. The normal TDU1 skybox looks pretty easy to implement to me, just a clear blue sky. But nope. For these versions, they instead get 3 brand new skyboxes: sunny with clouds, overcast, and evening light. Wow. I know that these are very simplistic skyboxes and that the game will randomly switch them out between loading screens, but honestly I'm kind of jealous with how these look compared to the PC version, especially that evening lighting. That looks stunning. Hell, that looks better than what we got in TDU2, in my opinion. What can you do? There's a great video breaking them down that I recommend you all check out by the Review Den. I just find it neat that they managed to get this game to fit on a PSP. But yeah, I guess you have those options if you want to revisit Test Drive Unlimited 1. Test Drive Unlimited 2, not so much. Honestly, all things considered, this was a fun revisit. I wasn't honestly expecting to make this video, but the more I played this game, the more I realized I had to talk about it. It was a fascinating trip down memory lane and also a pretty sad warning for the future. But nah, we're just gonna keep making more botched online racing games as time goes on. Hell, I'd be willing to bet money that that new game, Solar Crown, is gonna have the exact same online-only system that most racing games have these days. And when it inevitably gets shut down, it's gonna be even more unplayable than TDU1 or 2. Well, that's the video. I hope you liked touring Oahu as much as I did. Thanks everyone for watching. This video took much longer to make than it needed to, but hey, I guess I still managed to get it out. You may have noticed that I've been experimenting with different styles of video too, and hearing your feedback, it's clear that you guys are definitely interested in more. God, what would I do without all of you? You've been so supportive. Honestly, you're the reason I still make these things. Anyways, the next retrospective will be about a retro throwback Metroidvania. Although another game retrospective might come before it, we'll see. There's quite a lot of videos coming down the pipeline. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I hope to see you guys next time. Have a good one.